We're going to go ahead and get started, even though we're down quite a bit in numbers, and we are recording, and I do send a recording link, and I do get lots of requests for that. So all of you that are here, please know that we are recording, and you are welcome to stay on camera or off camera, whatever you're most comfortable with. We do have with us today Mike Dellinger from Michigan Virtual, and he's going to give us some insight on onboarding and supporting new teachers, and that's going to come in about 20 minutes or so. So in the meantime, we're just going to move forward with the slides. My contact information, I know that all of you by now probably have that, but just as a reminder, and hey, if you're a Twitter person, anytime you can tweet out that you're attending one of our events, we do like and appreciate that. So here's my elevator speech for this session. Gone are the days when we have hundreds of candidates for each position that we post. In some cases, not a single candidate applies for positions. As a result, schools are forced to do a better job finding and then retaining new teachers. While the hiring process is essential, the time between the job offer and the first day of school is necessary to support the new teachers. Creating a robust onboarding program and mentoring is critical. And those are some of the things that we'll talk about today. Knowing that, of course, in just an hour session, we don't have time to set you up for a complete new system or a process that you're using. We just hope to give you some thought-provoking information that will cause you to do some research for yourself and to reflect on your process and perhaps strengthen your process in any of these areas. As I always do, I'll follow up with resources, and I've collected a whole page of resources that have to do with interviewing and orientation and all those things. So if you are looking for information, you won't have to do a lot of the work yourselves. You can just use some of the resources that I've collected for you. So in this session, we're going to explore the reality of the teaching shortage. We're going to talk about the reasons teachers leave the profession based on some surveys of teachers in Michigan in the last couple of years. We're going to talk about the importance of recruiting teacher candidates and the impact of a solid onboarding program. And when you leave today, it is my hope that you will leave with a better, deeper understanding that you need to strengthen your hiring process, your new teacher onboarding, and your support of new teachers. So that's what this session is about. And as you read in the email I sent to all of the participants 2 days ago, I did make an executive decision to change the topic. And I did it for several reasons. One, because we are entering the hiring season. For some people, they've already been in the hiring season, but we're certainly entering the hiring season. And there's a lot of information that's being posted right now about the shortage and about what areas the shortages are in. And I wanted to just be able to give you really up-to-date information on things that are impacting you right now. Obviously, the topic of parent relationships is important. I don't mean to say that it's not, but right now your focus is getting ready for next year in hiring and supporting new teachers. So as always, the chat is open. You're welcome to put anything in the chat. I will certainly do my best to monitor that chat. And as I've said before, I'm kind of a one-man show here, so I'll do my best to monitor it, but there will be an open session at the end when Mike is done speaking where you can ask any questions, and you can also feel free to unmute and ask a question as we move along or clarification. And I know that I've said it before, but I welcome challenges because I know that we are in an ever-changing climate, and I know that something you may have found and something that you may have researched or experienced may be newer than anything I have, and you may be able to teach me something about what you know. So don't feel bad about saying, you know, I read where what you just said isn't applicable or whatever it is. Love the challenge. So let's talk a little bit about the teacher shortage. So the decline really began in 2008. And at that time, we projected that there was going to be a natural shortage, and a shortage based on the number of people going into teaching and the number of people that will be eligible to retire. We now have hit a critical point. As a matter of fact, a year and a half ago, so the start of last school year, we said it was a crisis, and it has done nothing but get worse since then because of the pandemic. And so to say that we're at a critical point in this matter is really understated. Actually, in 2014, Michigan universities graduated over 5,000 candidates, yet in 2017, only 3,800. and they're actually taking in even fewer than that. So you're looking at more retirees and less candidates. And of course, that's where the critical issue comes. In 2019, a group of educational associations, MASSP being one of them, put together a coalition, and they surveyed 17,000 educators in the state of Michigan. And they found that 72% of the respondents said that the lack of support from policymakers and politicians was their reason for wanting to leave education and to encourage others to not go into education, which is even worse than actually leaving education, is when you encourage others not to. Most people thought that it would be the fee, the amount of money that teachers make, and actually that was not in the first two things stated by teachers as a reason that they are leaving the field. It did come into play later on in the survey, but it certainly wasn't the top. And 66% said it was a lack of respect for the position. Now, when in 2019, we were at the tail end of a lot of the changes that happened to the teacher education associations. We all know that they lost a significant amount of their power, their negotiating abilities. And then following that, educators lost benefits. And so that also played into it. And that's, I think, where that 72% comes in, is saying people aren't even supporting the profession. They're taking away from the profession. That's why I want out. In 2019-20 school year, so last year, there was a 53% increase in mid-year retirements from the prior year. So 53% increase from the prior school year, people in the middle of the year that just left. And that has done nothing but increase. As a matter of fact, we've had a 44% increase in retirement since last August. So you had a 53% increase last year, and then since August moving forward, another 44%. And so just goes to underscore the critical situation that we're in. Right now, we have 18,629 Michigan teachers eligible to retire, and far, far fewer people ready to take their positions. Now, that doesn't mean they all will retire. That doesn't mean that at all. It just means that they're eligible to retire. The problem is, sorry about that. I just had a little interruption on my phone, and now I've lost my screen. What the heck? You guys still see my screen? I don't know what happened to it. There we go. Sorry. I didn't turn my phone off and it interrupted the screen. So with all those people eligible to retire, if they retire, obviously that's going to be a huge issue. They won't all retire. God darn it. I'm sorry. All right, let me try and find it again. What's happening, though, is a higher percentage of teachers are retiring when they're eligible, and they're doing so because they are just sort of fed up with the profession, and they're eligible to retire, and they say, "Why not? This is a good time for me to retire." So, as a result of the situation in the reduction of teacher candidates, since 2004, there's been several changes implemented to address the shortage. So we now have emergency permits. We have loan forgiveness for some areas. We have that retirees can return to work without penalty. As a matter of fact, on April 1st, MDE just released the new critical shortage list, and I have a link to that in your resources. We have substitute permits. We have a program now where you can pay student teachers and transition them into full-time positions. So it entices them to stay with you, and they sort of act as a substitute teacher as they're learning, and then ultimately they become an employee. We have interim teaching permits for professionals. So really what that is we've gone in some areas to saying, all right, you may not have a teaching degree, but if you're an expert in this area, we can hire you on this permit as a teacher, and you can go back and get your teaching credentials. We've done this in CTE for a long time, and now it's started to flow over into general education. And then they've also relaxed reciprocity with other states. Michigan is one of the toughest states to transfer your certificate into, whether it be a teaching certificate or an administrative certificate. As a matter of fact, our administrative certificate works in like 30 some states, but we accept almost nobody's certificate at face value in the state of Michigan. So that sort of lends itself to the difficulty of people wanting to move into our area for these jobs and to actually be able to get positions. Further help came in 2019 when Governor Whitmer assembled the Educator Advisory Commission. That commission recommended improving benefits and pay, reducing the cost of earning an education degree, support the hiring of minorities, provide debt relief for student loans, improve PD opportunities, especially those that bring relevance to the classroom, and to create an alternative assessment for certification. I know I'm aware of a couple situations personally where somebody was in a teaching position and they were an amazing teacher. They were doing a wonderful job, but they could not pass the subject area test to save their lives. And I know that on one behalf of one candidate, we actually talked to MDE and they actually allowed with a portfolio that student to retain that job, but they're looking at those flexibilities because we have situations where that's occurring. And so what all that research shows is the reason that they're leaving is because of the public's perception of the teaching profession, lack of support for administration, lack of support from administration, financial compensation, focus on student assessment, and teacher evaluation process. In all the studies and information that I read, those were the areas listed as why teachers are not getting into and why they're leaving. So when we reflect on what we can do, we only have control over a certain amount of things. We can't change some of the difficulties that educators are facing, but there are some that we can. And one of them is the hiring process that we use to get our new teachers, how we market our schools, how we choose the team that will actually help select the candidates, and how we improve our communication with candidates. So let's just talk about that for a minute, what that looks like. So when we say hire early, I know that there are some schools who are actively interviewing right now. Some have already appointed positions, but to do that, you have to know what your openings are. And so you have to seek retirement information as early as you possibly can. Some schools have actually built in incentives. If a teacher will declare retirement by a certain date, there's a financial incentive for them to do that so that the school is aware of that retirement. Rightfully, teachers can retire right at the last minute if they want to, but when they retire early, it certainly helps the situation. By contacting universities for recruiting opportunities. There was a time when we used to have huge job fairs that we would go to. I went to a couple as a principal where you would have positions and you would have, they were held in auditoriums and such at colleges and universities, and you would have hundreds of candidates come to your table once they found out what positions you were looking for. Well, the last year and the year before, the turnout for those were so low that they actually stopped having those. As far as I know, there is no major recruiting programs being held at any universities right now, but they still have opportunities for you to learn about the candidates that are graduating. So if you have positions to fill, you might want to contact some of our most popular universities that have teacher ed programs, and you might ask them to give you a contact list, or how can they help you get the names of those who are in a position to apply. And then reach out to your colleagues. I know within my league of principals, when I was in the position, I would often get an email that says, hey, in need of a math teacher, does anybody know of a good candidate? Sometimes what would happen is you will have hired somebody and you will have had a second and a third place person that you didn't hire, but were pretty good. And you could pass those names on to your colleagues and they could seek out those people as well. So don't hesitate to reach out to your colleagues to see if they've got something in their back pocket that would help you. So it's also important that we look at how we're marketing our schools. I know that schools aren't really good about keeping their job postings up to date. I especially know this to be true about administrative positions. I know I get contacted by people who are applying for administrative positions all the time, and they say, I don't think I qualify for this position based on the job posting. And really all it was is it was not an updated job posting. It had the old credentials for being a principal in it. I imagine that postings coming from our schools for teachers also at times have not been updated. Updated not only to just include the exact credentials, but updated to include just to be more inviting for somebody to apply, to be a little less stale. And so you might want to look at how you're posting those positions, not only how you're posting them, but what sites you're posting them on. Those sites are ever changing, and you need to learn about what ones are being hit the hardest by candidates, and you're going to want to make sure that you're advertising in that. I know one of the last years I was there, I found out a site that we were still advertising on, and I said, no, I mean, that's not where teachers are looking for jobs at. And so we kind of did a deep dig and figured out better places to post our positions. Use social media. It works. It really works. Somebody who knows somebody who saw a posting. I think it's important. And I'm not just talking about within your own little Facebook family or your school's Facebook family, but I'm talking about Twitter, Instagram, all those things where people in that age group of new teachers are visiting on a regular basis, and your posting should be going there as well. And then I thought of also creating like a brochure or some kind of an advertisement. Most often when a superintendent is being sought, the school puts together this amazing brochure that markets their school to people, knowing that they want to entice the best candidates for the position. And so they do a lot of work to put together the brochure and the advertisement that they post and hand out. And I would encourage you to do the same thing for your teaching positions. Make your teaching positions something that people want to apply for. And by marketing it, you can do that more. Then when you start getting prepared for an interview, choosing your team and who actually does the interview is really important. I've been in situations I know where I couldn't figure out why the team was who the team was, and worried even prior to even interviewing the first candidate that we didn't have the best people in place that would make the best recommendation. So you really have to create a situation where people feel like it's a privilege to be on the interview team, because you are treating them professionally, you are communicating with them, you're letting them know that you value them as a team member, you're providing training to that team member. And I don't even necessarily mean formal training, but you're at least sharing your expectations of them prior to the interview process. I know I've been on numerous interview teams when I literally didn't know anything until I walked in the door and sat at the table. That's the first time I saw the names of the candidates. It's the first time I saw the interview questions. It's the first time that I was even brought into the process. And that's just not a good way to go when you're hiring such an important position. So think about who's going to be on that team. Subject area experts, maybe one of your best teachers that isn't even in that subject area, but just has the best teaching practices down and knows good teachers when they see them. Non-certified staff, somebody that works in maybe as one of your assistants or an aides, but works close to instruction. When possible, it's always best to have two administrators. I don't recommend the superintendent being on the initial interview team. Every school has their own policy, and I'm not asking you to change that. I'm just saying the problem is when you have the superintendent on the initial team, there's nowhere to go next. There's nobody to help give more information. And so a lot of schools don't involve that superintendent until the next step, the callback interviews. But if you have a colleague in the district that is in a different building, or maybe an assistant to you, having that second person that looks through the eyes of an administrator is valuable and helpful. So when you get to the interview process, I always say, check your non-references. And what I mean by that is certainly you'll check references if you decide to move forward with a candidate. But before you even decide to interview them, try and figure out who you could contact that might know that person. Maybe they've worked in the district. Maybe they currently work in the district. Those are good people to contact. People who will tell you what they know about that person, although they weren't listed as a reference. You can pretty much be guaranteed if it's a reference, you're going to get good feedback. All right. So look for non-references when you're screening participants to decide if there's somebody that you should call in for an interview, especially if you see something on the resume that maybe is questionable. I encourage virtual screening. Before you even have that first interview, take the top 10 people that you see, or the top 5 people, and do just a quick Zoom meeting with them. Just say, we just wanted to meet you. We just want you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your qualifications or experience, and then we'll be making the determination on who we will interview. So you can actually weed out those people whom the minute they walk in your interview, the door to do the interview, you're not going to hire them because of something that they've said, whatever the case is, something you want to weed those people out before you even start that process. Also important to treat each applicant like a future employee. You have to really value the people that have chosen to interview for your school. So many schools make the mistake of not communicating with their applicants. When you pick who you're going to interview, you should send a letter to every person you didn't choose, thanking them for their interest, letting them know that you're going to keep them in your files, but they weren't selected for an interview at this time. You never know when you're going to have to go back to that person, and you're not going to want them to have a bad taste in their mouth about the way they were treated by your school. I know this to be true, that often you'll say, all right, during the interviews, you say, we plan to make a decision by Friday and we'll let candidates know. Well, that employee, every one of them are sitting on the end, the future employee is sitting on the end of their chair wondering if they were successful or not. And when you don't call on Friday, it ruins their whole weekend. So if you didn't make a decision by Friday, give them a quick email that'll say, you know what, we're still making our decision. You won't hear till Monday. And you have to contact each person you interviewed, whether you hired them or not. They will appreciate that, even if the answer is you're not going to hire them. And then make sure that you conduct your interview process professionally. But to do that, I mean, prepare the team. The team needs to know about these candidates before they walk in the door to do the interview. You need to have the interview setting. Now, I know a lot of interviews now are going to be done virtually, but even so, you need to make sure that virtual setting is the best that it can be. And make sure that your questions are thoughtful, that you really have thought out those questions, because getting the right question, when you ask the right questions, you're going to get the answers that you need. And sometimes at the end of an interview, we feel like I didn't really learn what I needed to learn, but usually it's because you didn't ask the questions that you should have asked. And so you should also reflect on the questions that you're using for your interviews. Sorry about that. And then you might consider at the end of every interview doing a campus tour, whether that's in person or virtual. And then if you're in a smaller community, at least a community tour. I know that's harder in bigger communities because the community is so large, but in the district where I worked, it was easy to have somebody that wasn't on the interview team, take that person on a 15-minute tour of the community. That just let the candidate know that you were serious about them and you wanted them to know about your community. So those are just some ideas that you might consider about the interview process. Let's talk about the interview questions. I did include lots of different links to different interview questions, but I'm just going to talk more about the categories. So what I found is a common theme is that these 6 categories you want to make sure you ask questions about. Their credentials and experience, but you don't want to spend a ton of time on that because you can see that in paper, and you wouldn't have interviewed them if they didn't have the right credentials. So you don't want to spend a ton of time going over that when that's already obvious what their credentials are. About their pedagogy, though, you don't necessarily have to talk much about their content area. You can pretty much assume they know their content area, but do they know the best practices in teaching? What do they know about differentiation and students with IEPs? What are their experiences teaching with technology? That would be an important thing to ask now. And I could have gone on to list things like, how do you engage students? What do you know about engagement? But all those things that are important to you, you should explore. Better than asking them what's their philosophy of teaching. Asking them, what do you know about the pedagogy of teaching? What are your experiences and your beliefs? Now, when you talk about content, we don't really want to ask them if they know the periodic table by heart. We want to ask them, do they know the relevance that needs to be placed in their subject area? How do you make it relevant for students? What are your familiarity with the standards? Do you even know what has to be taught in your subject area in the state of Michigan? And maybe most importantly, how do you assess student learning? What ways do you make sure kids are learning when you're teaching? And then, of course, questions about classroom management. If you have particular programs that you follow in your district, such as restorative practices, you'll want to know if they have any experience with that, any knowledge about it. And it's okay if they don't, but it's good to ask, because if you really believe in restorative practices and your culture is restorative, and you ask somebody a question about restorative practice and they say, oh, that doesn't work, we've tried that. Well, you know right off, they don't have the beliefs and values that you probably want in your district. So that's some of the reason why you ask information about their classroom management. It's more to get to their beliefs and their values. How do they communicate with parents? And then always ask what questions they have about you, because that's where you'll find out how interested in you are they. Did they even do any background work? Have they even formulated any questions for you? So those are some main categories that you might want to consider. And again, have included some resources for those. So then we get them. All right, we hire them, we get them, and now we got to keep them. So how do we do that? Well, our surveys told us that we have to improve our preparation programs in order to retain teachers. They have to understand better what teaching is before they go into it, so that only those who are really interested in it really pursue the degree. So that's something we can't control, but of course the hiring process we can, and we just talked about that. Also the onboarding process, what we do with them from the minute we hire them until they start their job, and then how we support them in mentoring once they are in a position. And then, of course, making sure that we are always looking at our culture, our working conditions. Improved working conditions was one of the things that were mentioned as what has to take place in order to retain teachers. So I'm just going to give you a brief explanation of onboarding, and then we're going to turn it over to Mike, and Mike is going to go ahead and talk to you more about some of his practices in that area. So onboarding, we're talking about making a connection with them in your community. So when you hire somebody, if they don't live in your community, you're going to want to give them some resources to contact some local real estate agents, maybe people who rent, other community resources that you have. If they have a spouse and that spouse will be looking for work, you might be able to give them a connection to somebody in that area, the area that their spouse will be looking for work in. You're going to want to make sure they have access to the building as soon as you possibly can. The more time they spend getting ready, the better that is for you. But if you don't let them access that, they can't do anything about it. And then maybe have some inclusive communication. And what I mean by that is, especially once you hit the middle and toward the end of May, when you start communicating about things for next year, the planning for next year, start including them on those communications, those emails, so they can start to get a feel for the kinds of things that are happening in your building and the kinds of information that you share with your employees. And then lastly, that mentoring program, an actual robust mentoring program, unlike a program that many of us did at one time that was just to check off the list. Okay, we have to have a mentor, so we're going to check off the list and we're going to have a mentor. That's very different than actually having a robust program that actually makes sure that the correct mentor is placed with the correct candidate. Make sure that you have accountability for that mentor. Make sure that you're giving your mentor guidance about what they should be mentoring about, and making that connection with them early. Don't wait until the school year starts. Give them somebody they can contact over the summer if they have some questions. And so working on your mentoring program certainly will contribute to the keeping of good teachers. So with that said, that leads us to Mike. Mike retired from the public education in 2018 after a 25-year career, and he spent 21 of those years in administration, and that's similar to my path. And so what it really says is that he has an incredible amount of experience in administration. His experiences included being an athletic director, an assistant principal, a special education administrator, and then finally a principal. He currently works for Michigan Virtual, and he is the administrator of school partnerships. And, that job entails tons of things, but I can tell you that Mike and I are really on the same plane when it comes to how you support administrators. And we're constantly talking about that. And so his role really is, how can he support administrators through Michigan Virtual to help them solve problems that they are having with student courses. So Mike, are you going to share your screen?
I probably will a little bit later, but I don't need to now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Mike, that being said, go ahead.
Thanks. Like Tammy said, I've been thinking about this for a while. I work with Michigan Virtual, working with different schools on a variety of different topics. I came there 3 years ago after I retired. And, my background, I've been hiring and interviewing teachers for 21 years, and that's kind of been my mantra is building that staff. And I really have been thinking about it a lot lately, seeing the news and seeing where, teachers are retiring or they're leaving the field, and who blames them? People used to want to be teachers. It used to be a profession that was revered, and now it's become kind of a punching bag. And now teachers are like, you know what? I don't need this. I'm out. So how do we attract new teachers to the profession and retain the teachers we have? So I'm just going to give you some practical things, some things I did, some things that worked for me. But I'm going to start backwards on keeping new teachers, because they say, you know, something like 50% of the new teachers are out of the profession within the first 5 years. Well, why is that? Well, I'm just going to tell you flat out, it's relationships. And I know people always talk about building relationships, but if it weren't true, people wouldn't talk about it. You have to have those relationships with the new teachers that you hire. And so when principals hired new teachers in the past, it was really easy to truly onboard teachers. Myself, for example, I did not have the kind of responsibilities that you have now during the summer. And that was just 3 years ago when I left public education. I didn't have COVID testing. I didn't have to provide technology to equipment to everybody. I didn't have to know about internet access. I didn't have to worry about food distribution, graduation, student and staff spacing, scheduling for a hybrid, scheduling for a face-to-face, scheduling for an onboard or online. I didn't have any of that. So I will admit I had some more luxury in the summer than what you might have. But I still took that time to get to know all my new teachers. I mean, I would take them out to lunch. I spent countless hours with them in the summer in my office. I had filled with cool swag stuff from your school. Give them a t-shirt, give them a sweatshirt, give them a mug, give them a hat, sit down with them and get to know them. Take the time to look at them as a person and get to know them as a person, not as a principal teacher, but build that relationship. Go over the curricula with them, answer questions anytime, have that quality unscheduled time. And I know it's harder now because I used to be able to do it. You know, new teachers are so excited, you know, so they come into school all the time, and it's the summertime and I didn't have a lot to do. So I could talk with them in the break room. I could go see them in the hallway. I'd talk with them, you know, while they were on the mailbox or the copy machine. Talk to them about what the first day is going to be like. How do students arrive at school? How to create excitement at first day in your classroom. Share personal stories about me, my family, my goals, my aspirations. Talk about their goals and aspirations. Those opportunities are going to be a lot harder now. If you hired a teacher in this last year, man, that's been really hard, because how do you get to know them based on making sure you're safe, COVID regulations, your time, so many other factors. I mean, just think of all the ways that when you were a teacher, your principals got to know you. And maybe it was a more informal setting, such as choir concerts or sporting events. Can't go to those. Encouraging your new teachers. I mean, I used to have my new teachers doing so many homecoming activities, and then I could laugh with them about donkey basketball or, you know, something that was funny. I got to know many of my teachers chaperoning dances. I mean, all new teachers have to sign up. And so you make them do prom. There is no better way to get to know a person or their spouse or significant other when you're spending 4 hours at prom standing there talking to them. I mean, those are gone. So now we have to make sure we can make those connections. So like, think about what are your touch points now with your new teachers, the ones that you've hired in the last year or two, or existing teachers that you might not have that strong relationship, because you have to build those relationships. You can't just stop by their classroom, or if you can, if you're lucky enough where you're in one of those type of hybrid situations, but you can't do it as frequently as you want. So you really have to be intentional about making those connections, because I'll tell you, if a teacher doesn't have that connection to you, the building, your school culture, it's easy to walk away. They don't have that personal bond with you or maybe the teacher next door because they've been doing online or half-time online, or there's been a hybrid, or they come in and then they're gone for 3 weeks. If you don't have those solid relationships with them and they don't have that connection, they can walk out the door a lot easier than if they have that relationship with you. So how do you do that? How do you do that this summer? Again, it has to be intentional. Are you having designated times to meet with your new teachers? You should be doing it this year right now. If you're not having designated times, you can still start. Do like a virtual check-in if you're not meeting face-to-face with Zoom or Teams. And it can't just be, hey, I'm checking in. How you doing? You doing good? All right, I'm out. That's not gonna work, okay? If they have anything to say, and if they say, oh, you know what, everything's fine, I'm gonna tell you right now, you have a problem. Because in this year, if a teacher says, you know what, thanks for checking in, everything's fine, it's not fine, okay? There's two things that happen. Either they don't have a good relationship with you and they don't want to talk about it, or they think they're being evaluated, or they haven't really quite grasped that this is not fine. This is not a normal year. Teaching hybrid, teaching online, teaching face-to-face with masks, kids coming and going and then being off for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's not normal. So you have to make sure you have some intentionality when you set up these meetings, and it takes time. I mean, you have to say, I want to meet with you from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock or 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, one-on-one, and don't make it an evaluation process. Don't end the conversation when they say, I'm good, I'm ready to move on. This is your time to build those relationships, to get those teachers to open up, to talk to them, to make them feel connected to the school, even if they've been there or not, so that way they want to stay in this. And I know it's difficult and it's awkward because we're used to doing everything face-to-face. It's very awkward for me to do this right now because for a year I've been doing Zoom meetings and it's driving me nuts. I like to be in the building. I like to be in the classroom. I like to meet with people face-to-face. I like to come into your office and sit down with you. It's hard to do that, but it can be done if you're prepared and you have questions to ask. Do not, again, just say, I'm just checking in, things going good, all right, see you later. No, ask them, you know what motivates you? Talk about your fears. Hey, you know what? This is what I'm scared about right now. And this is where I failed this semester or this year. And talk to them. It's difficult, I know that, but you can do it. So keep the conversation alive when you meet with new teachers. Second thing, are you sending something in the mail to your new teachers? Even if you're lucky enough to see them in the building, are you sending them something in the mail? Are you sending them a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a baseball hat, a mug, a quick note of appreciation with that and say, hey, thanks for all you're doing. I'm glad you're a part of our building. If you do that, they feel more of that connection and they want to stay. I know it's a little, but it really means a lot. I was kind of just thinking this morning, you know, what do some great onboarding things look like? Well, this is where I'll share my screen quickly. Because I just threw these on here. Does your onboarding process look like this? Okay. Are you giving some swag? Are you showing people, look at this. Welcome, Kristen. Little personal note for Kristen. Look at this one. Uber does this. You got a shirt, a hat. Are they coming into their classroom and getting set up like this? Are you sending something like this home to them if they have to teach online, where they're excited about it? And I know you say, well, that's going to cost me money. You know what? It's not going to cost you any money. Trust me. You have it in your budget. But what is better? What's better, getting this or here's our rules and regulations? Because that's what we're doing that first day. We're giving people all our rules and regulations. Don't do that. Think about the excitement that a teacher has when they get this, as opposed to, here's the staff handbook. Good luck, okay? Word spreads fast. I got a job at blank district. The principal was so nice and welcoming. I can't wait to get started or to continue next year. This year was tough, but I'm excited for next year because I have such a great group of people that I work with. I have a great principal that I work with. People want to work in those schools. And now we start talking about a little bit of recruitment, okay? Because now you're looking at it and you're saying, wow, that word spreads out there that your district is the place to be because of the relationships and the connections you have. So back to that swag thing. I know some of you are looking at that going, there's no way my superintendent's going to give me that kind of money to throw out 50, 60, 70 bucks. Yes, they will. And if they still won't, and you can't find the money, do something else to make those connections, okay? Give them a book. Send a teacher a book. Any one of your new teachers or a teacher that's been there, send them a book. All you got to do, turn around, grab one. I can look at some of your things right now. You have books back there. Grab a book, send it in the mail and say, you know what? Here's a note. This was one of my favorite books. I was thinking about you, thought you'd like it. Costs you nothing. Okay. Now the teacher feels appreciated. And the book doesn't have to be about education. Probably even be better if it isn't, because then if it's about education and it's coming from the principal, they'll think, oh man, I must be doing something wrong. Wants me to read this book, so I do better. Just send them a book and just say, you know what? I was thinking about you. Just things like that make the connection. Everyone has always said, kids don't care what you know until they know you care. It's the exact same for teachers. If you truly care about them and you build those relationships, they're less likely to leave the profession, okay? In the long run, I know that swag, I know those little things, it sounds trivial, but it's a lot less time and stress for you than to have to constantly replace them. Excuse me. So now, let's talk a little bit, like I said, I'm going backwards. So now, we're in the business of recruiting. That's all there is to it, okay? You have to recruit talent. I would say about 10 years ago, there was a buyout, in Michigan, state of Michigan, buying out teachers, and I had to replace 4 English teachers. That was half my department. So it was about 2010, I think that's when the buyout was. I had 300 applicants for 4 English teachers. Now I talk to principals and they're like, you know what? I might get 6 applicants for one position. And I can tell you right now, 2 or 3 aren't even worth interviewing. So what can you do about it? Well, Tammy gave you some great ideas, but I want you to think about the first time you applied for a job or the jobs you applied for. And I want you to think about the good experiences and the bad. Whether or not you got the job is irrelevant. I don't care. Okay. Do the good. Do the good experiences. Okay. Are you thanking applicants after the interview with a quick email? Say what? Thanking them. They should be sending me a thank you note. Yeah, they will. The good ones will. But understand this. Thank the applicants with a quick email. All you got to say is, I really enjoyed the opportunity to meet you. I appreciated your enthusiasm or your experience that you brought to the interview. Just to reiterate, here's our timeline. Doesn't have to be long. But what that is doing is setting the table for building those relationships. Tammy talked about it. I'm really going to hit on this. Are you getting back with applicants you don't hire in a timely manner? Or are they waiting by the phone for days? Are you contacting them before the weekend? This is just personal preference of mine. I never let anybody worry over the weekend. Okay? Make their weekend or at least let them move on, but don't drag it on over the weekend. It frees up their mind. And I'm going to tell you, it frees up your mind too, and you can enjoy the weekend. Try as best as you can not to have things hang over your head on the weekends. I'm telling you what, it will wear on you too. And you wanted to talk to that parent about this discipline situation and you couldn't get a hold of them. And then all weekend long, that's playing in your head until you can't get to them on Monday. I'm just telling you, that's just a side bit tip. Handle things before the weekend so you can enjoy your weekend. Are you personally calling each applicant that didn't get the job and explain what they could have done differently? Don't just say, I'm sorry, we went with a different candidate. Are you coaching them up for their next interview? Because you never know. Tammy said this, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. Your second choice, a year down the road, you might have another opening. I can think right now, I had a science teacher for chemistry. She had the credentials, did a decent job. I just had a better fit with another applicant. Then next year, I hired her to be my biology teacher. Biology was her strong suit. It wasn't chemistry. She had heard about my district, wanted to be in it, applied, even though she had the credentials. I was really wanting to go with the chemistry angle. But the next year I called her up, and I am convinced it was the way she was treated during the process the first time that allowed her to come back. Because again, word spreads fast. And I've hired teachers who have heard about my district from applicants I didn't hire. I didn't get the job there, but I'm going to tell you what, they were so nice and welcoming. That would have been a great district to work for. They go back and talk to their friends, okay? So are you kind and welcoming in the interview? And Tammy mentioned this, and I want to take it a little bit farther. And is your hiring committee kind and welcoming? Think about some of the interviews that you've gone to. Are they stuffy and intimidating? If they're stuffy and intimidating in that room, in that interview room, it's going to be a stuffy and intimidating school, okay? Good teachers in this market can walk away. Not because you don't like them, but because they don't like you. So think about that. We are now in a supply and demand curve, really. And so what we're looking at is, you know what? We have to make sure that they're a good fit for us, but teachers can make sure that you're a good fit for them too. So are you selling your district? Are you pointing out the points of pride that sets you apart from others? And are you selling your culture? And is your committee members doing that too? Okay. I'm going to tell you, this is hard to say because it's a room full of principals, or Zoom meeting full of principals, but you have to know what your competition is. And I know some of you have neighbors, other principals right here in this room, but you have to know what your competition is and what makes you different and what's going to set you apart. Okay. My last school was a very nice Class B school, nice facilities, decent athletic program, great fine arts program. But I also had 3 large Class A schools in my backyard with more money and better facilities. So I better have something that sets me apart, because the good teachers won't have to sell their house. They don't have to get up and move to another community. They're right there. So they have a choice. There are other districts that they can take their talent to that are close. So if an applicant said to you right now, at the end of an interview, what sets you apart from other schools, what would you say? I mean, that's kind of a rhetorical question, but I really hope when we're done here at 10:30 or whatever, you take that and you think, what sets me apart? Why would I want to work here instead of here? You have to figure that out, but you also have to let that get out there so you know what the competition is. Now, that being said, Tammy mentioned it too, work your network of principals. I, every spring, called the principals around me because, like I said, I had those bigger schools around me, and I would say, do you have any student teachers last year that were good? Okay. I'd call them. I scoured the internet sites on postings, because I might need one later on down the road. So I call somebody and I say, you know what, I see you're interviewing for a math teacher next week. I will be at the end of the month or later on in the summer. Can you let me know if you have 2 outstanding candidates for one position? I'd like to interview the one you didn't choose. And also reach out to others. And this will come back for you tenfold, not only as a principal, but in your relationship with your friends, your reputation, other applicants. You know, you interview somebody, and here's how the call should be after you turn them down if they're good. Hey, Mark, I thought your interview was great. However, we chose another candidate for, they had better experience and they could fill some other opportunities we had. But you know what? I know John Smith, principal at Portage Central, he's looking for a science teacher, and I would certainly reach out to him on your behalf if you are interested and would like me to do that for you, because I really think you have a lot to offer. So now John Smith, he's pretty happy about it, because I call him up and I'm like, hey, I just interviewed this kid. He's really good. Just didn't have a spot for him. You should take a look at him. The applicant appreciates it. And somewhere down the line, I know I'm going to need help. And so I want that principal, whoever I call, to help me out. I want that applicant to know that this is a quality place. I know you didn't get the job, but we take care of people. And it will come back to help you. Again, back to your hiring committee people. Do they show excitement for teaching and for the culture of the school? Can you hear it in their voices? I had great teachers that I never put on my hiring committee because they just kind of were stiff and they just kind of sat there, and you know what? They didn't show passion. They were good teachers, but in that environment, you know what? They weren't really inspiring. I didn't want them. I didn't want that to be conveyed to my applicant. How do they share that enthusiasm and that passion when you're introducing them? When you go around and say, I want to introduce you to our committee that is going to be looking at hiring a new teacher. How do they convey that enthusiasm? Are they sitting there staring at the resume because that's the first time they've seen it? Tammy mentioned that too. And I've been on committees like that. Don't ever do that. But because if you do, that's what happens. They come in, they sit down, and this is all they see is the top of people's heads because they're looking at the resume because they've never seen it before. Okay. Make sure they're engaging. When you hire that new teacher, how are you introducing them to the staff and the community? Are you assigning them a buddy for the summer or right away? You know, especially like a virtual buddy. I'm not saying a mentor. I know we have to do mentors. I'm just saying somebody that might have the same interest. It might be a teacher that you just hired a year ago. They're in the same age and have the same interests. And you can say, hey, you know what? I want you to reach out and help this person, especially with technology nowadays. Do you have designated times for that teacher to meet with you and other staff members over the summer? You can't hire somebody in May and then say, I'll talk to you in August. That's not building a relationship. Again, it's going to be harder to build those relationships. So make sure you have those designated times and you have to set those. And then make sure you have an agenda, by the way. Don't show up. It doesn't have to be formal, but just know in your head, this is what I'm going to talk about, instead of going, hey, are you excited? It's going to be a great year. Anybody have any questions? No, have an agenda, have something ready to talk about, okay? Make sure it's worthwhile. If you don't, I'm going to let you know that also sends a message that meeting was worthless. Why do I have to have another one in another week and another one in another week? But if you have something that you want to talk about where you're setting those expectations that you're building that relationship, it's going to work. So it's all about relationships. Time's running out. If I have anything else to say, Teacher Appreciation Week is May 3rd. So now I just gave you some ideas. So that's what it is. So if there's any year that teachers need appreciated, it's this year. I'll put my contact information up. Like I said, I'm willing to talk about anything that can help you. At Michigan Virtual, I'm given the flexibility to work with many schools on a variety of subjects. For the past year, I've mostly been working with teachers to work in the online environment with our content, but I talk to principals all day long, and I can help you with scheduling, SEL, summer school, professional development, or just share ideas that other principals talk to me about. Don't go in this alone. I'm glad you're doing this, but understand that there's other people out there that help you. I can help you. Again, like I said, I talk with principals all day and my topics change daily. And it doesn't have anything to do with my position now. It might be, hey, Mike, what are people doing about graduation? What are they doing about prom? What are they doing about assemblies? What are we doing about this COVID testing for sports, choir concerts, open gyms? I got basketball just ended. I want to do open gyms. What about conferences? What about masks in schools? I'm telling you what, I talk to people about everything. I don't have all the answers, but I'll share with you what I do know and what I do hear from other people around the state of Michigan. So if you have any questions or comments, send them my way. You can ask me right now. We still have a few minutes left to go, I think, Tammy. So
yeah, we do have a couple of minutes if anybody wants to ask a question right now. If not, like Mike said, you can reach out to either one of us whenever it's convenient for you. And we're both always willing to help support you. Anything specific, anybody? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on then to just wrap things up. As always, I offer a exit ticket. Appreciate when you engage in this. It just helps me to understand what you pulled out of this and how we might change it. The question this session is, what areas of the teaching, hiring, and recruiting process will you strengthen? There's a QR code to get to that Padlet, and there's also an address there. And as always, I'll send that in my follow-up email tomorrow. Tomorrow, I will include in the follow-up the resources, the link to apply for Sketchies if you attended this, and the link for the recording and all that stuff, as I always do. So I will send all that to you tomorrow. I'll include Mike's contact information as well, just in case you didn't get it out of the chat. And then with that being said, I just want to thank you for attending this session, and for those of you who have attended multiple sessions. I think that it's been something that has been beneficial to many people. And as a result, we're going to run a similar program next year, even considering maybe having a year 2 where we continue on with maybe the candidates of this year with different topics, versus we'll repeat these topics next year for the New Principal Network Connect, but we might have a Connect 2 type thing we're thinking about. So keep your eyes open for that. And I hope that you'll attend if it's been beneficial to you. And as always, I have just a couple of minutes of updates for those of you who want to hang around for those. And I'll just go forward with those right now. And if you're not interested in the updates, of course, this is the time where you can check out. And again, thank you. So the application for the Summer Learning Grant request deadline was April 15th. Ironically enough, on April 19th, MDE released clarification to the guidelines. There's a link here to those guidelines. It's in our resources. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means they're going to let you apply late, or what in the world, giving you guidance after the deadline, how that would have been helpful at all. But in case you want to access that, you can. Michigan secured a federal waiver for us to not have such accountability standards attached to the high stakes testing, including the percentage of people who must participate. They did not waive us having to give our high stakes testing, and I'm sure that you know all of that by now. They actually released a new calendar where they actually went over some of the ways they've expanded it. So there's a link for that as well. Here, and if you haven't gotten that, but MDE put that out last week, was an extension to the testing and what that window looks like. And then along the lines of, oh, sorry about that. I just escaped from the slideshow. I did not mean to do that. 1 second. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm going to go on either whether you can or you can't. And then lastly, Michigan Virtual, as you know, Michigan Virtual is prepared to support your summer learning planning through their Ed Ready, Math and English, Essential Credit Recovery, and 150 full courses that include French and German. So if you're still trying to figure out what you're going to do for the summer and what you're going to do for next year, Mike would be a great person to reach out that could help you with that, or send you to the person who can. Also have expanded their professional development catalog, and they've updated it for next school year. And that would be a great time to access those best practices in online teaching and some of those trainings. And they will actually personalize that training for you if you contact them. And then lastly, their mental health and social emotional courses. You can still qualify to get some of those courses for free. Some of them are free. You can qualify to get some financial to help with the full load. And also, if you offer some of these courses in your summer school planning, you'll qualify for that additional $100 of funding. So those are just some updates, things that have come across my desk in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Again, don't hesitate to contact me if I can be of support, and I'll also include Mike's information in the follow-up. So with that being said, I wish all of you the best of luck in the rest of the school year. I know it's quite a treadmill moving forward, and I hope that you can find some enjoyment in all of the chaos. So have a great rest of your day, and I'm going to go ahead and conclude today's meeting, and you'll hear from me for tomorrow.